Hello everyone. Thank you for attending today's webinar, Maintenance and Engineering Connected. Our presenter today is Marius Neuhauser of BlueCielo, who will introduce himself in a moment. Today, he will help you discover how to improve your operational efficiency by streamlining the exchange of critical information between maintenance and engineering. But before we begin, a bit of housekeeping. I want to let everyone know that you're in listen-only mode. Using the GoToWebinar panel, please type any questions you may have as we go along. Then at the end of the webinar, we will hold a Q&A session where I will read your questions to Marius for him to answer. Additionally, all those attending today will receive a thank you email from us with a link to view the recorded version of this webinar. So with that, Marius, you can go ahead and begin whenever you're ready.
Yep, thank you, Susan, and welcome everybody also from my side. I hope you will enjoy the webinar we have today about Maintenance and Engineering Connected. So before we start off with the presentation, maybe just to introduce myself so you know who's the presenter today. As Susan said, my name is Marius Neuhauser. I'm now around 14 years in engineering and asset management in one way or the other. I'm actually working since 3 years for BlueCielo, working in the pre-sales department, but I was switching from the owner-operator into that role actually, because before I joined BlueCielo, I was working 11 years for E.ON, which is one of the largest utility companies in the German-speaking area, and I was working there in product and project management, also implementing 2 different document management systems as a corporate solution for E.ON. So that's where my background is and that's where I'm coming from. And now I'll guide you through our today's webinar. So we start off with a general introduction here into the common challenge of having engineering and maintenance as 2 completely separate departments within the organization. After that, I will show you how easy it is to connect both departments with the help of our BlueCielo solution. We start looking at this from the maintenance department first, where we'll dive into the enterprise asset management integrations and provide feedback from the field to the engineering departments. And later on, I will show you how engineering is picking up the change request, and we'll have a deeper look under the hood to see how the BlueCielo technology can help you simplifying that process. So let's start off with our first chapter, Facing the Challenge. We from BlueCielo are focusing on asset-intensive owner-operators in 5 key industries for more than 30 years. So due to that focus, we have a lot of expertise and experience when it comes to delivering sophisticated solutions, providing huge benefits to the organization. One key thing we identified is that there is a lack of connection between maintenance and engineering. So both departments are typically working in closed environments, most of the time, each of them in their own software solution, preventing a smooth and efficient asset lifecycle. So when it comes down to that, information is related to the assets and those need to be tracked efficiently throughout the entire lifecycle. And they need to be available as quickly as possible when it comes to downtimes or outages. We achieve this by creating a relationship between the assets and documents, and by that connecting the 2 different worlds. Now it is possible to quickly retrieve, for example, inspection reports, loops, PNIDs, and other asset information with the click of a button from your asset management systems. And just one thing for clarification, if I'm talking about assets, I'm talking about pumps, valves, vessels. So that's just to clarify, because we have that more in the context in the coming slides. So I'm talking about the webinar now. What's in it for you? So by connecting both words, you can improve operational efficiency. That means you can avoid time loss due to transition or unnecessary paperwork, which you might have today, talking between those 2 departments and handing over information. Reducing downtime, so reducing time which is spent on the planning and preparation of downtimes, but also have quick information quickly at hand in case of unforeseen events during downtimes. Find data and documents with a click of a button. That means that from your asset management system you can easily fetch information by just pressing one button. And that is really an enormous time saver when it comes down to breakdowns, unscheduled downtimes, and even planned downtimes when we go into that preparation phase. Connecting maintenance and engineering by working collaboratively in one environment allowing both parties to look at the same information in real time, and bridging gaps by applying a digital change management, including redlining functionality. One single point of truth, that's really the core and the essence of that for all your asset-related information. And what I have here, I have just two more metrics we have from our value assessments, which we did with existing customers. And you see here two numbers like 167% is the internal rate of return, and the payback period, which is a bit less than 9 months for the implementation of our software. And I think that's really showing the huge potential we have and how we can improve the business processes with the help of our solution. So let's dig now a bit deeper into our solution itself and look at the concepts here. So this chart here shows the asset lifecycle with its four key disciplines. We have the engineering on the upper right side. We have the commissioning phase, then the handover and the operations and maintenance phase. Each of those disciplines have specific needs which can be addressed with our solution. Looking a bit more into those key areas here, we are talking about asset and portfolio management, which is looking into improving the fleet or creating new assets. We have the project performance management on the right side, which is looking into more designing and building assets in an efficient manner. We have the handover part at the lower part of the screen, which is the as-built, handing over to as-built phase, which has a huge potential for optimizations, especially because here information needs to go back and become your master documents again. And that's where a lot of time is spent in reviewing information, and that should be as streamlined and as controlled as possible. And last but not least, on the right side, we have the asset performance management, which is finally looking into how assets can be operated and maintained in the most efficient way. And our solution is really designed to facilitate those key areas and connecting the different departments. So now digging a bit deeper into the maintenance and engineering field, which we have here highlighted on the screen. So we'll focus now on those two departments for this webinar, maintenance and engineering. What you see here on the screen is the representation of the business process between those departments. So it starts on the lower right side here with work identification. In the work identification, the scope of the work will be determined. Here, all asset information are important to better define the work needed to be done. So everything which you can get and collect from the system in an easy and fast way will help you streamline the process. Once the tasks are defined and the work order is created, the work planning takes place. That's our step 2 here. This happens within all the your asset management systems. After the tasks are scheduled, the work execution begins in the field. That's step 3. While the maintenance engineer is out in the field doing his replacements or work, he might have some feedback which needs to go back to the engineering department. Or he discovers an undocumented item in the drawing where he quickly wants to apply some red lines. So this is the feedback loop, which is often cumbersome when both departments use different systems. I'll show you in a bit how this is looking within the BlueCielo solution. So once the work is completed, we have that handover and transition phase here, where they might need to follow up tasks done by the engineering departments, like modifying documents, planning new development improvement projects based on the feedback which has been coming from the maintenance department. This is done finally in step 5, where the modification takes place. In the final step, there is a review, which can be either done by the engineering department itself, or it could also be a collaborative review where also maintenance is checking some of the documents and checking the feedback they gave. Once all parties have checked the documentation, it will be released as a master document and becomes your new as-built version. During our session today, I'll pick up some important steps in this process and go through them in detail. So later on in the presentation, we'll look into step 1, which is work identification. We'll look a bit deeper into step 4, which is about feedback and documentation, and step 5 about modification. So Here you'll find some of the customers who already successfully connected both worlds by connecting the BlueCielo solution with their asset management solution. We listed here the three main players which we've seen in the market is SAP, Maximo, and Ultimo. There are also other systems we can connect to, like for example Infor. On the SAP side, we have a couple of customers listed here which have different ways of integration. So for example, you can decide if the SAP system is your leading system to create assets, and then those assets get synchronized to the Meridian system, but there can also be use cases where it works vice versa. So where actually in your planning and designing phase you create the assets in Meridian, and then they will be created in SAP and create the corresponding functional locations and equipments. So there are different ways of looking into that and different ways of integration. Yeah, you see some logos here also on the Maximo and Ultimo side. So that brings me to our first poll question we have in here. So we want to know from you, which systems does your organization use for the maintenance management? I want you to just select which ones of those you are using, and then afterwards I'll talk about the findings and the results. I'll just give you a couple of seconds to make your choice. So thank you very much for making your choice here. What we see from the results is that the majority of you is using SAP as asset management system, asset and maintenance management system. Also quite a lot of people are using Maximo. We have roughly 10% using Infor and roughly 30% using other systems. So thank you very much for making your choice. So continuing with the presentation now, we get to our first real topic here, connecting engineering and maintenance with one click. So looking again at the cycle we have, we look now at the first stage of the maintenance process. Roughly that maintenance process here can be split into two parts. We see the left part, which is the asset management system mainly, and the on-site and field work execution. And then on the right side, we have the topics which will be covered by the Meridian system. So during the work identification we have here, it is important to collect all the documents related to the assets which need to be repaired or replaced. The BlueCielo Explorer hooks into the user interface of your asset management system, and that's for example SAP or Maximo, and directs you with one click to all of the documents which belong to that asset. Those documents can be maintenance manuals, inspection reports, loops, or P&IDs, just to name a few of those possibilities. So let's have a look into the system now. So I'm just jumping off here into my system, and I'll log into my SAP system. So, and from the SAP system, there are various ways to look into the information. So we could fetch up information from the work order directly. It depends a bit on the installation you have on the SAP side. So some customers use mainly functional locations. Some customers use equipments for that. I'll now show you as an example a way how you can fetch up information from a functional location. So I'm opening up my transaction here to display a functional location. I'm picking out a functional location which I know and which I would need to do some work on. So opening up that functional location, I'm now looking at an inland pump plant, a spiral pump, which is broken down and where I want to do some work on. So now I have my functional location over here, my functional location number, and now I would like to see all the information which belongs to those to this functional location, or in the same way it works with equipment as well. So from here what I can do is I have a button in the SAP user interface which directs me to all the information which is stored in the BlueCielo Meridian system. So I'm just clicking on that button. What it will do is it will open up my Explorer client and it will show me all the related documents to this asset. So right now I found 3 different documents. For example, I found an isometric, a process diagram. I found an electrical document, a circuit diagram, and I also found a maintenance report. So from here, I can dig deeper into the information. I can say, okay, for example, I want to look into the isometric, see some information on the drawing itself, but now I would like to really quickly look into the drawing to see, for example, which valves or which I need to really close to look at the asset. And in here, I'm finding my pump where I was talking about. Okay, so by that I can just easily fetch up the information which are related to an equipment or functional location, look at those information, open them up, view them, print them, and use them for my process. Okay, so that's a very easy way connecting both systems in an easy manner. That will return me to my presentation again. So we look now into the work identification part here, where it's all about connecting maintenance and engineering with just one click. Now our next chapter will be around feedback and change requests. So that will focus on a different area of the whole maintenance and engineering process. You see now, after we looked into how we can improve and simplify the process in the planning phase, let's look now into how we can improve the feedback loop between maintenance and engineering. That's also done with our BlueCielo Explorer product, which we've seen before. So we look here at this transition period from the work execution, which is done in the field, providing feedback and documentation to the engineering department, which then can start, for example, a modification based on that. I just drafted one business case, which we can run through now as an example. So I have this rusty pump in here. We have the equipment number or the functional location of that asset. We've seen that already in the SAP system. And you know, if I'm now, for example, a maintenance guy, I'm looking at this rusty pump. I might be interested in a couple of things. So, for example, when it comes to maintenance, you know, I might be interesting to know what is the age of that asset and is that still under warranty? So, can I claim something? I would like to look into the documentation. So, look at the P&ID, for example, see which valves I need to close to, you know, make that pump accessible and to be replaced. Same thing is valid for the electrical side. So I would like to look into the loop to see which switch I need to move to disconnect the pump from the grid. I would also like to look into things like inspection reports to see what happens to that pump in the past, and also what has been done during the last inspection. So on the spare part side, I might be interested to see is there a replacement pump in stock so that I can just fetch them up and replace the pump directly. What we'll do now is we'll look now into our system and see that we search up the asset and look up all that information here. So I'm just switching over to my Explorer system. I'll start here fresh because I'm now the maintenance guy who wants to look into the asset itself. So that's my landing page for the Explorer. I'll start off with selecting I want to search for an object. And in here I have now different ways of navigating to my asset. Either I decide to go to my asset by using our property-based navigation where I can drill down based on the plant and on the system. I can drill down, find my asset. But in our case, I said I have a very straightforward example, so I know exactly to which asset I need to go to. So I'm just opening up the pump we were talking about. Oh. There we go. This is our inland pump plant. I'm looking up now the document here, the asset, and I find a lot of properties. So these can be properties which might have been synchronized from your asset management system to provide one single point of information. So in here I can not only see what kind of equipment it is, also see like manufacturer information. I see model numbers, I see some specifications about this equipment. I see also that two spare parts are in stock, and I see some information when that equipment has been built in, and what about the warranty period. So we see that the warranty ended already in back in 2008, so most likely we can't do any claims here. but as we have 2 spare parts in stock, it is a good idea to go now and get the spare part and replace the pump. For that, I would like to maybe look into the documentation here so I can see the related documents. This will list me now the exact documents which I've also seen during the planning phase through the SAP interface. So in here, I can now, for example, look up the circuit diagram, the isometrics, and so on. In my scenario, what I would like to do now is providing feedback to the engineer. So let's just imagine that we are the maintenance guy. We changed the pump, but due to that change of the pump, maybe a newer model number or a new model was available in stock. So we replaced that old pump with a newer model. So we would like to feedback that information to our engineering department. And also maybe there's a second case when we look into that circuit diagram. So let me just open up that circuit diagram. We can view it from here, looking into the drawing itself to see, for example, where we need to switch that off. But we did the replacement already and now would like to give some feedback here. So there are various ways of providing feedback. I'm now using my feedback page in here, which actually allows me to trigger a couple of events. So I'm looking at the drawing again. We've seen this is the asset which we just replaced. And now we identified that there's also maybe a second pump next to that, and I would like the engineer to be notified of that. Okay, so I'm just making that a bit bigger and starting to apply my redlining. So let's just say, okay, in here the second pump is missing. I'm storing the redlining, say, okay, we have a replace going on here, and now first of all I say, okay, my pump 1 has been replaced, and I replaced it with a new model, and that's a GV631 model. But please also add the missing pump, which we figured out once we are in the field, that there was a second pump next to it which was not on my loop. So I just say, please also add the missing pump. Okay, that's just one example how we can provide the feedback. I'm just saying update, and by that, this information has been pushed through to the Meridian system and can now be picked up. So going back to my presentation now, what we looked through in that business case is we checked out some information on this asset. So we looked into the maintenance side of things. We looked up some documentation here. We especially looked into the loop diagram, said that there is a second pump which is missing on the loop diagram. We checked on the spare parts in stock. We replaced the pump with a new model. And now we added some redlinings and also some comments in there to trigger our change process with our engineering department. So looking into the next steps, now we would change roles and go more into the engineering field. After the maintenance guy did a great job in fixing the issue, we'd like to now switch roles and look at the work of the engineer. Our colleague from maintenance told us that he replaced the pump with a newer model. That's what we just wrote in. So we need to change that in our system. But also what he did is he noticed us that a second pump standing next to the broken one wasn't in the documentation. So what we do now is we look into the Meridian system to see how this change request pops up, apply the changes we need to make in order to have his feedback reflected in the documentation. And one thing which I also want to point out right now is that we did a quite extensive webinar on the concurrent engineering topic, which is all about modification and the change process, which might be interesting to you to look up. So that's available on our BlueCielo website. Okay, but now I'll jump off, going back to my system here. I'm closing down the Explorer because we did all of our comments. We finished everything here from the maintenance side. And now I'm just going into my Meridian system. So this is typically where engineers start working. And we said, okay, there might now be a new change request for the engineer. So I'm looking into the open change requests here, and I see that indeed there's one drawing which has where it needs some changes. So I'm looking at the drawing. what I see here is I see the red line my maintenance guy did in the field, and I can also check on the remarks to see what he did. So he said, okay, the remarks type is a replace, and he told me that the pump has been replaced with a new model, so we need to change the model number in here. But also he said, please add the missing pump, which was next to the broken one. So let's first of all start modifying that document, changing the metadata, and then changing the drawing. There are two ways of doing that. So either we decide this is a very small change, then we can change the drawing right away in the Meridian system here by just starting, for example, a change. But there's also a second way, and that was explained in detail in the concurrent engineering webinar, where it is about creating projects and working in projects. So right now what I will do is I'll say, okay, this document needs to be changed in the context of a project. So I can say, okay, I would like to create a project copy. I'm doing that now. Now it asks me obviously where these documents needed to be changed. Now I'm looking up, I have a couple of different types of projects in here, some investments project, pre-study projects, and so on, but also the major project. That's just one example structure which we have in here. So I'm now selecting the detailed engineering phase where I want this document to be changed in. Just selecting OK. Now what the system notifies me about is that this document is related to an object. So it asks me what should happen, what should we do with the related asset. Do we want to include that in our revision, or do we also only want to revise that drawing? For now, I'm just saying I want to revise that drawing, and I'm saying OK. So now what it does, it will just create a copy of that document in my project, and I can also show you that when I go into my project. So here's now my copy, and now I can start modifying the drawing, but also the asset itself. So let's first start with the asset. So we know that pump 1 here was replaced and it got a new model number. So let's look at the related objects to that drawing. So what we find here is this is a list of all the assets which have been connected and linked between the drawing and the different assets here. Right now it is just one asset which is linked to that drawing, and that's my pump, because that's the only asset which I have on my document here. So I can just double click on that and it would direct me to the object in the Meridian system. In here I find all the tag information which I've also seen before in the Explorer system, and we also see that here we still have the old model number. So now I can just edit it right away and say, you know, it has been replaced with a new model number. It might also have a new manufacturer part number which I can change in here. Just clicking OK and saving the changes. So that's also done on the already done on the asset side. Now going back to my document, I also need to apply some changes on the document itself, right? We said, okay, there is a second pump missing in here. So let's just make the change in here. I'm just opening up, starting the workflow, starting a change process. I'm doing the changes myself. I can also select another person here who needs to do the changes, but right now I'll just do the changes myself. So now the document has changed its status and it's under change, and now I can start modifying the document. Just double clicking on that, it will open up the authoring application. In this case, it is now AutoCAD. Let's just wait a couple of seconds until AutoCAD is fully loaded. Closing that down. Okay, and now I'm just looking into that information which we find in the drawing itself, and I just noticed that this one is actually placed in the paper space, which is another fault in the system, and I can just, you know, once we are modifying the drawing anyway, I'll just make that change and make it in the right way. So let me just grab that one, connect it to in the right place. And now also they mentioned about the redlining, the missing stuff which is in there. By the way, I can still see the redlining here in the system. So I'm going back now, applying the missing second pump. just copying and pasting that stuff here. Just put it in here. For our purpose now, I'm just changing it. That is now pump 2. So I did that now. Let's just maybe squeeze that a bit so that it becomes visible a bit better and the text is not overlapping. So do it like that. So now we have our pump here, which we replaced, and we have also the second pump where our nice maintenance guy notified us about that it's not in the loop. I'm saving the drawing, closing the drawing, and you see now the drawing here has been refreshed. A nice thing about our system is that it tracks the information which is and the assets which are on the drawing itself. So now I can view the related objects, and now I see that I have this first pump in here, which was already on the drawing before, but I can also now look at maybe new objects which have been added to the drawing. So I'm clicking on drawing tags, and now what the system does for me is it will scan the file, scan the drawing, and will see which objects will be found in the drawing itself. So we have the first pump, which was already linked, but it also said, okay, there's a second pump now in the drawing, which is not yet linked to my asset. And it also says there's a corresponding object found in my Meridian system. So that means this object is already created. This object might came from the asset management system, but it is not yet linked to my drawing. So I can easily say on create link, and now the link has been established between the drawing and the asset. So that's a much easier way, especially when we talk about multiple assets which have been found in the drawing. I can also automate that process and say, whenever I'm done with my changes in the drawing, I can say, okay, going through the next workflow step, please synchronize all the assets which are found in the drawing. So that's one way of doing that. Okay, now I added the relationship, and that's now also visible. For example, if we look at here at the relationship, I see that this drawing is now linked to 2 different objects. Okay, and the whole navigation in the Meridian system works both ways. So I can say from the drawing itself, show me what objects are on that drawing, what objects are affected, but I can also double click on the objects itself, go to my objects and see in which drawing this object has been used. So I can quite nicely navigate myself through that structure. Okay, so what we did now is in that system, we looked in there from the engineering point of view. We picked up the change request which was coming in from my maintenance department. We applied the changes which are necessary, which were noted in the red lines, and I made that copy of the document into my project. And now from my project here, I can actually push it through the workflow step and start reviewing maybe just within the engineering department on the 4I principle, or I can just maybe review that together with my maintenance guys. Okay, but that's handled in a lot of detail in the concurrent engineering webinar, so I'm skipping that part right now and returning back to my presentation. So looking into that one, what we did is we looked at the modification part, so that's now the engineering side of that cycle, and now it's time for the next poll question. So what we would like to know from you is, how does your organization transfer the feedback right now between maintenance and engineering? Do you typically use manual hard copies, so handing over real documents, information? Are you using typically files with comments which are sent by email? Are you using any integrated systems with automatic notification, or are you not sure about that? Again, I'll just leave you guys for a second here to answer those questions, and then we look at the results. Okay, thank you very much for sharing your information. Looking at the results here, what we see is that we have and in a relatively similar amount, we see that most of you guys are either using manual hard copies or working with any files which are commented, and you circulate them afterwards by email. then a very few percentage of you are using already any integrated systems with automatic notification, and we have roughly 30% who are not sure or don't want to answer that question. So I think that goes pretty much into the direction which we've seen already in the demo so far, is that an automated and integrated system to track and exchange those kind of information is really beneficial and can help you saving a lot of time and being much more efficient. So now, after we captured that the process side of things, I would like to look a bit more in detail into how we can connect documents and assets. So you've seen already briefly in our last session how easy it is to extract the text out of a drawing and create a connection between the documents and assets. That's what we've seen just recently. As the final part of this webinar, I would like to look into the technical possibilities for linking those documents and assets. Basically, there's a many-to-many relationship possible, which means that multiple texts can be linked to multiple documents. Those documents can be really various types of documents depending on the type of asset. In this PNID, for example, which we see here on the screen, you'll find different types of assets like pumps, valves, lines, and so on. So what we do there is we extract all these text information, and then those text information can be linked to various documents, as you can see here on the screen. So there are multiple ways for doing that, and I listed here the 3 options which we can facilitate to link the documents with the assets. The first one, option 1, is based on the block definitions. This expects proper block definitions in your drawing, and that's a very, very common scenario for new drawings. We've seen that, that functionality in my demo, which I did a couple of minutes ago, where we just open up the drawing in the Meridian system, then open up the drawing in AutoCAD. We added the new pump just by copying the block definition from the old pump, changed the tag number in there, and then created that relationship. That's option 1. This mostly, as we state here, applies to new documents because all of the block definitions need to be somehow consistent. Option 2, and that applies for most of the legacy documents, is based on the full text index. That means that you define a specific pattern which will be searched for in the document content. So in that scenario here, it doesn't really matter if the asset numbers are block properties or if it's just plain text anywhere in the document. And that's really why this is in this scenario is most applicable to the legacy documents, because there you're facing various different types of documents. You might get documents from external contractors. You might have changed your rules, so how you create documents in the past 30, 40, 50 years of operations. So there's a broad variety of different block definitions, but also plain text. And our system here can extract this tag based on the pattern and link the assets to the documents. The third option which we have is doing that on demand. That means asset numbers which couldn't be read from the document itself, or you want to create a manual link. There you can just open up the drawing itself, search for the assets, and link them manually. I would like to now show you option 3. We've seen option 1 already in the previous demo, as I said, and now I'm just adding on top of that how we can manually add relationships between documents and assets. So let me go back to my Meridian system here. I'm looking just into the same drawing which we did before, where we added the second object. Now going back to the objects, and I see here my 3 options. So I have the drawing text, which is extracting the information out of the block definitions. I have the text tag, which will look for a specific pattern in the drawing and find all the objects in there. And then last but not least, I have the Manage Links button, and this is now the option we are going to do. So I'm clicking on Manage Links, and I'll get now a new window here. I'll just make that a bit bigger for you guys. In the lower side of the window, I see the 2 assets which have been already linked to my document, and here I have now a search field where I can search, for example, for the object number if I know the object number, or I can search in the text property, for example, just find anything which are pumps. Okay, so now I get a list of all the pumps I have in my system, and I can select one, multiple ones, whatever. That doesn't really matter. It depends which ones you would like to assign to a document. And now I'm just clicking on Create Links, and all of these objects have now been added as a link to the drawing itself. So that's pretty much it. I can close the information. I get here the full list of all the linked assets. And now, again, I can navigate back and forth, for example, from this drawing to maybe the pump, and also see here in that pump that this pump is now used in the drawing. So that gives me a lot of flexibility also in the system of creating manual links. And by the way, those manual links are not only valid for asset and documents, you can also create links between documents, for example. So there are various ways of creating links. Okay, so going back to my presentation and summarizing on the three options which we've seen, I would like to, and now already looking at the time, we get to the summary and our question and answer session. So what we've seen today, we've seen how we can access the technical documents with a click of a button from directly within your asset management system. That's what we've seen at the very beginning, where we clicked on the button in the SAP system at the functional location, and it opened up the Explorer system showing all the documents which are linked to that asset. In our case, it was a P&ID, an electrical loop diagram, and a maintenance and inspection report. We looked also into quickly intuitively search for technical documents using a unique asset identifier. We did that once we worked as a maintenance engineer, went into the system, into Explorer, we typed in our asset number we would like to search for, and it brought us directly to our asset. But I also showed you the way of property-based navigation, where I can drill down to my asset based on the location, on the system, and so on. We looked at how we can improve the collaboration amongst departments. So that was the part where we connected maintenance and engineering with the feedback, for example, where we said, okay, as a maintenance engineer, we applied some feedback, some redlining to the drawing itself. We typed in some comments, and that went directly into my engineering world, where in Meridian somebody can pick that up. We looked at how to reduce the document assets and the document access and communication costs by streamlining that process. It also implies that we improve the quality, the completeness and reliability of technical asset information and the as-built data. And last but not least, we can increase the production through shorter unplanned process downtimes. We also initially talked about reducing the times of, for example, collecting all the information when somebody is setting up the work order, that this time can also be reduced. Okay, that brings me to the end of this webinar. We run now roughly 45 minutes, so we have some time left for questions. And I'll hand now back to Susan. If you haven't typed in your questions so far, please do that now, and I'll hand over now to Susan to read those questions.
Great. Thanks, Marius. And as he said, if you have any questions at this time, if you haven't already done so, please type them into the question panel, and I'll read them to Marius for him to answer. So first question we have here is, if the changes are made within SAP or Maximo, are the changes immediately live within BlueCielo?
Yeah, that depends on the way of integration. There are two ways of integrating the SAP system or Maximo system with Meridian. First way is if you have both systems talking to each other directly. In case of SAP, it's, for example, the technology of remote function calls. Then you can do that pretty interactively. That means as soon as somebody changes something in SAP, it goes into Meridian and vice versa. There's also a second possibility for companies who want who don't want to have Meridian talking directly to SAP. There it works over staging databases. That means information gets written from SAP into, for example, a SQL database, and then written into Meridian. And that's typically a scheduled task. And then it depends on you how you define the the scheduling of the task.
Okay. Next question, does the tag equipment ID on the drawing PNID/circuit diagram have to have a .object added?
No, definitely not. That's now just set up how I set up my system here. As I said before, there can be specific patterns. So it doesn't need to be .object. It can also be, let's say, just the full equipment number or functional location number. And it is also possible, in addition to that, that you add, let's say, the specific pattern in the configuration file. That means that you can even identify tags which are on your drawing, but they are only a small chunk of your whole asset number. That's pretty common that if, for example, if you're in a specific area of your plant and you look at a drawing, because of space reasons in the drawing, you might just see the last piece of your equipment number or your functional location. And then you can define that pattern in the BlueCielo system, and it will automatically add the missing part to find afterwards the related asset in the SAP system.
Okay. Next question we have, can a dual tag on the PNID be automatically linked? In other words, there is a pressure transmitter PT-6B on the PNID, but this is contained in the drawing as a block with 2 attributes.
Sure, that's also possible. So it doesn't really matter if that's block properties, if that's text in the drawing. It can also be read out automatically by the system.
Okay. Someone asks, our maintenance management system already has features to manage documents. What added value does the solution provide?
Depending on the asset management system you're using, what we see in most cases is that the functionality, first of all, the document management functionality, especially when it comes to engineering documents, is really poor in the asset management systems. So that means, first of all, the management of documents is much easier, the CAD integration is much easier, but what it really comes down is when I look, for example, into SAP and how SAP links documents to assets, I really need to dig up every single asset number, every single equipment number, and link them manually to the drawing. What we can do in Meridian, what you've seen, is we can extract those tags automatically and create those relationships. That can be a fully automated process, which is saving you a lot of time compared to, let's say, the out-of-the-box functionality which asset management systems provide.
All right. Next question. You mentioned making changes to documents during modification projects. How is that handover managed?
Yeah, so we've seen the changes in the documents during that small project which I created. So I created that project copy, put it in there. The handover at the end, after we did the whole review cycle, there's the handover taking place from project to the master area again. And that is pretty nicely described in the last webinar we did about concurrent engineering. So I suggest you look that up, because there you have the full process described and also shown in a demonstration.
Great. When maintenance replaced pump 1 with another model number from model X to model Y, is there an operational manual associated to pump 1, or do you manually have to update/replace these documents so that the operational manual now refers to model Y?
Yeah, that depends how your system is set up. It can be automatically. In our case, I just replaced the model number, and I didn't have any corresponding descriptions of the model in my system, so there was no need to replace any documentation. But by reassigning, for example, another equipment number, it can also be that automatically those reference documents, in those cases like description of that specific model, all these links will be automatically be taken over to that new asset.
Okay. Is it possible to link text documents like Word, Excel, or PDF with an asset as well?
Sure. We've seen the extraction so far. I demoed that for AutoCAD, for an AutoCAD file, But as you've also seen that, for example, a PDF file was in the list, which we've seen at the very beginning on the maintenance side, that also a PDF was linked to that document, and it works in the same way with all other formats. So I can link whatever document I have in my Meridian system, I can link that to the asset. And it really depends if there is, for example, a full text. If that document is really searchable, then I can do it in most cases automatically. If it's really like a picture, then I need to apply that manual link, which we've seen at the end of my demo, where I created a manual relationship between the asset and the document. So it's possible for all of the documents.
Okay. We work with AutoCAD P&ID. Are the tag document relationships created with AutoCAD P&ID also supported?
Yep, they are. So we fully support the AutoCAD P&ID product. That means that you can not only maintain let's say the related project files and everything, the whole project of AutoCAD P&ID within BlueCielo. Also, the information will be extracted in the same manner like we've seen it now with the plain AutoCAD.
Okay. We have a paper-based archive. Can that be made accessible in your software?
Sure, that can be. There are, we have different options to do that. In most cases, first of all, that paper-based archive needs to get digitalized. So for example, you can start scanning those files and applying it and adding them to the Meridian system. And then Meridian has supporting functionality that you can add, that you can create what we call a hybrid document. And that's your scanned file, which is lying in the background. And you can start your changes with, for example, AutoCAD on top of that, and you can delete things, you can add new things, and then it will be kept as a hybrid document as long until it is fully digitalized and vectorized. The second possibility also will be to vectorize drawings from the beginning and then put them into the Meridian system.
Okay. Can maintenance or engineers attach a scanned PDF redline for more complicated changes?
Sure, that's also possible. I showed you one functionality now by providing feedback within Explorer. There's also a second possibility in Explorer where you can have a whole feedback discussion going on a document. I think we have still a couple of minutes to go, so I can also show that quickly to you in my demonstration, because I think that's a pretty nice functionality. So let me just open up my Explorer client again. I'm just going to any document here just to show you how that process works. So if I'm opening up that drawing here, I get now the visualization of the drawing, where I can also start applying red lines, just like we did before. And you see here, when I'm closing those red lines, they appear here in a whole communication chain. So from here, I can also start adding comments, for example, just like we did before, but it's also possible to attach files. So in here, I can click on attach files, and I can, for example, add a picture or whatever I would like to add in here. Let me just show up if we have any pictures here on my computer. I don't have one, so let's just take a document, for example. Edit that document, say, please check document, and now by submitting, I'll add those information here as the feedback loop. And then there's even a more mature version where I can say I want to reject or decline specific comments based on where I am in my whole project and in my change management process. Okay? So going back to the questions.
Awesome. Thanks, Marius. I think you might have answered this one before, but somebody asked, can I link to a document outside of the Meridian system?
Nope, I didn't answer that so far. The documents, to link those documents between with the assets, the document needs to be within the Meridian system.
Okay. And let's take one more question. Does this solution integrate with other maintenance management systems besides SAP and Maximo?
Yep, I think we had Ultimo before on the slide. So Ultimo is a second or third system, and next to that we have also Infor, which is supported. Theoretically, there could be more, depending on the way of integration and how the integration works. What we've seen now, the SAP integration, and I can tell you that in the other asset management systems, it all works in the same manner. So it's all about getting an icon into your asset management system where you can jump off into Explorer to see all the related documents. So it all works in the same way, just different systems. But right now we have 4 systems which are officially supported.
Okay. Well, we got one last good question, so I'm going to throw one more at you, Marius. Can the linkings of drawings to the assets in an application such as Maximo be done by a user or admin, especially if it's done in bulk?
Okay, so actually it depends on the user privileges you assign to a specific person. So creating that relationship between assets and documents, that's a specific user functionality you can assign to a role in the Meridian system. And then it's up to you and your definition if you just want to limit that to specific, to a privileged user group like the administrators, or if you want to make that available to other user groups. So that can be defined by you.
All right, great. Well, thank you all for your questions, and thank you, Marius, for your detailed answers. If we, for some reason, didn't get to your specific question, we'll have somebody follow up with you to do so. Otherwise, if you have any additional questions or would like to watch any of our past webinars on demand, you can use the links provided on the screen. And also, as a reminder, all those attending will receive a thank you email from us with the link to view the recorded version of this webinar. So we hope you enjoyed today's webinar and would like to invite you to register for our next webinar, Centralization, Is It Right for You?, which will take place on Thursday, November 5th at 11 a.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Central European Time. And finally, when you close your GoToWebinar browser today, you'll be prompted to fill out a short 5-question survey about this webinar. We ask that you please just take a few moments to provide us with your feedback so that we can continue to improve our webinars. So with that, thanks everyone so much for attending and have a great day.